Hey, I'm Noam Weissman, and this is Unpacking Israeli History, the podcast that takes a deep dive into some of the most intense, historically fascinating, and often misunderstood events and stories linked to Israeli history. Before we start, as always, check us out on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, all the places. Just search Unpacking Israeli History and hit the follow or subscribe button. And one more thing, I'm on Instagram. Check it out. Me, Noam Weissman. Noam L. Weissman _. Sometimes it's interesting. I think it is. I don't know. Maybe it's not. I think my wife likes it. Not sure. Anyway, follow the link in the description of this episode. Okay, yalla. Let's do this. Listen, if you like this episode and you just heard this on the ad, you're going to love Sapir, and I got to name that. It's a quarterly journal of ideas edited by Bret Stephens. You got to check it out. Subscribe for free at sapirjournal.org/Noam. Really, really, really check it out. It's awesome. It's awesome, awesome. All the brilliant ideas from diverse perspectives, the way good learning and education should be. Speaking of good learning and good education, today's episode is about something many of us are very not educated about, and we want to learn a lot more about it. It's about Israeli elections. And when I say Israeli elections, it's not really an episode about the 2026 election alone, which is coming up very soon in like 2 months. We're not going to be focusing, I'm using the word focusing, on candidates and predictions for this year. That's not my focus. I'm not the hot takes guy, as you know. What we wanted to do here is classic Unpacking Israeli history style. Slow down, take a step back, and actually understand what's going on. What are Israeli elections all about? Israel doesn't have a president that you vote for directly. It doesn't have two parties. Nothing in Israel seems to work the way Americans expect. So today's about the system. It's about the system, not the outcome. And to speak about the system, to speak about the history, I am talking to Rachel Azaria. Rachel is exactly who, the way I view it, that you want explaining all of this. She spent years inside the system, city council, the Knesset, Israel's parliament, actually getting things done through it. She's not just experienced, she's an expert who has lived the thing she's about to break down. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Happy it worked out.
So let's go directly into the conversation. I want to really understand the Israeli election experience. I'm going to go broad and get more specific as we go along. And the first segment, the first idea I really want to speak about with you about is, why does Israel keep having elections? Israel has had 25 elections to date. And if I did my math correctly, 25 elections in how many years has Israel been around? Not yet 80 years, right? So it hasn't been around 80 years, and it has had 25 elections. Most Americans think they understand elections. Last election in America, in the United States, we voted either for Donald Trump, the guy in the ballot for the Republican Party, or voted for Kamala Harris, running for the Democratic Party. It has one person, one party. They either win or they lose leadership. That's how it works. And if you're listening from the UK or Canada or Australia or South Africa or Mexico or wherever you are, you're probably thinking, sure, my system doesn't work exactly like that either. And maybe I said one of those countries incorrectly. I vote for a local candidate, or my ballot has preferences, or my country's had actual coalition governments too. So, okay, I get you. I feel you. But Israel is stranger than all of those. So let's start with the basics. When Israelis go to the ballot boxes in October or anytime, can you explain simply what an Israeli actually votes for?
Okay, so in Israeli, when you go into the ballot and you vote, you have boxes with many, many, many different sheets of paper that you can choose and put in the envelope and vote for. And it's important for me to say that there are many of them, because you choose a party that you believe in the party. And there can be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, many different parties in the Israeli parliament. Out of these parties, okay,
I'm with you.
Whoever gets the most votes, or whoever has the most chances of forming a coalition after the elections, this is something that's being figured out. And then the different parties, they say who they believe in, one of the leaders of one of the parties. and the president, which is more, our system is more kind of like the British Queen, okay, the Queen of England. So he has the members of the different parties come in and say who they recommend, or who, and then whoever has the most possibility of being able to form a coalition, they're granted the option to form a coalition. And then they have time to form the coalition. If they're successful, then the government is voted in and they start working. If they're not successful, and that's what we've been seeing over the past few years, time after time, if no one is successful in forming a coalition, you go back to elections. And there can be one party that gets an opportunity to form a coalition and they may not be successful. And then another party can get an opportunity to form a coalition, which basically what it means is that once our elections are over, it doesn't mean everything is over. It means that we're still trying to figure out who will be the next leader of the state of Israel.
And how do you actually build a political party? Meaning, like, if you get 3.25% of the vote, then you're able to form a party. But it wasn't always that way. In Israel's founding, through 1988, it was around 1%, and then it was raised to 1.5%, and then 2%, and now it's 3.25%. Does that weigh into the whole calculus?
Yes. I mean, most parties are not democratic parties in any way. There is no way that the people of Israel vote to decide, or the members of the party vote to decide who would be their representatives in the party. It's often someone charismatic that starts his party. He brings in either, people he agrees with, or people he knows, or people he believes in, or whatever, and they form a party. He's the head of the party. It's usually a he.
Yeah, I was going to say, you keep on saying he, because it has been recent. I was looking at the head of all the parties right now, and it's all men.
It's all men, yeah. Women did head parties in Israel, but usually women have more chances of heading a party when it's an organized party with a democratic system, when things are very clear. Usually when it's not clear, that's in feminist theory, it's all over the place, okay? Whenever there are no very set rules, usually women can't, they can't make it. So it becomes more
meaning not structurally, not by the law or the rule, but by reality.
It's not structured. Yeah, when it's not structured. Yeah. So they're heads of parties, and if they're charismatic enough, if they're loved enough by Israeli society or whatever, they can start. Whoever wants can start their own party, but then they have chances of actually being elected. And we see that there are quite a few candidates that have, by the polls at least, they have, a lot of votes, like Gadi Eisenkot and Yair Lapid and Bennett that joined Yair Lapid and the ultra-Orthodox, right? They also have their parties. Their parties also aren't democratic parties. And they will be elected probably. And then there are a group of people that are trying to form their own parties. No one knows if they'll cross the threshold. No one knows if it will happen. And they're trying, and then they might merge to make sure they'll cross the threshold. And then there are also the Democratic parties, which is mainly the Democrats, it's called, the Demokratim. That's a new party that was formed from a few other parties. And then there's the Likud, that almost all of the seats used to be by primaries. And now Netanyahu there's a big campaign going on within the Likud that he wants more seats that he can decide on his own, like the heads of many other parties. And then there's several parties that have, but that's what's going on now. So the threshold used to be so much lower, okay?
And why does that matter?
It matters because when you want to start a new party, the threshold now is 200,000 votes. That's a very high number, okay? Yeah. Like, I run an organization that helps reservist families, okay? In Israel, there are nearly 400,000 reservists. Like, just to give you to understand what a large percent it is to have 200,000 people vote for you. And otherwise, all the votes just, you just lose them all. So this is a big thing.
Wow.
In the past, they're just gone. In the
They don't
past,
go, meaning that you can't be like,
no.
hey, no number, like, you don't like get to like use that currency elsewhere. Be like, that's my number one pick is Likud. My number two pick is Labor.
No.
Or
And
no.
and you can't say my number one is whatever Gilad Erdan that's trying to form his own party.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't cross the threshold, so we'll give it to the Likud. You can't do that.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. And so people are afraid they'll lose their votes. Their votes will be thrown like to the garbage. That's how people say it. So that's why it's very important. And when the threshold was lower, so it meant that new parties could merge. And why is it so important in these specific elections? We are after almost 3 years of war, okay, and the elections will be after 3 years of war. We're in a situation that there is a lot of the relationship between Israeli society and Israeli politics is very messy. There isn't much trust. Israeli society doesn't have much trust in Israeli politics. And this should have been a moment where new politicians would rise. But it's very hard for new politicians to rise. And you see that most of the politicians that are in power are those that were in power before the threshold was up. So that's a big thing. Because the threshold is so high, chances are that only if you are in power, you'll be able to stay in power as a party. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, that's a part of the system that, thank you so much for explaining that I think many of us are confused about. So let's go into the fact that no party, as I understand it, well, no party has ever won outright. It's never been the case that any party has ever won a majority in Israel's history. And to win a majority, that means 61 of 120 seats. Why not? Why has it been the case that nobody has ever done this? And I know that in 1969, Hama'arach, meaning the alignment, was the closest ever to doing this. They had 56 seats, led by Golda Meir. Golda Meir, almost first time a party would ever have a majority in Israel's history, right? But that still never happened.
And never happened.
Why not? And walk me through what happens instead.
Okay, so first of all, I think one of the reasons it doesn't happen is because that Israel is formed of many different groups that are used to have their own parties. Okay, but we have the ultra-Orthodox parties, which are the ultra-Orthodox are mainly like 13% of Israeli society, but because that their percentage of voting is very high, so their parties are usually a little more than their percentage in Israeli society. So this is like, if you imagine like 15% of the votes are ultra-Orthodox, okay? And then you also have the Arab society that also usually vote for Arab parties, okay? So then they're 20% of Israeli, or 22% of Israeli society. So they usually vote less than their percentage in the society. So then you also have, 15 seats that are Arab, but between 10 and 15, it depends what happens. So you have these two groups that always vote, or almost always vote, to their parties. And that's why the large parties, first of all, will never have the majority. And then you add also Tzionut Datit, the Orthodox Zionists.
It's religious Zionists in English, but they don't necessarily, Rachel, right? They don't necessarily represent all religious Zionists.
No, but in the past, it was more of a party. Like my parents always voted. I come from a right wing house. My parents always voted. One voted for the Likud, and one voted for the Mafdal, which was the party of the religious
national religious. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and that is something they said, we're voting for the Likud, so they'll have the majority and, they'll be able to form the coalition. We're voting for the Mafdal or for the religious Zionists because they will take care of our school system, like the education. And Israelis are used to thinking that way. Like it makes a lot of sense that that couples will speak between themselves and say, we'll vote one for this and one for that.
Wow.
And that's something that I don't think Americans can imagine that because it's very different. But when there are few agendas that are important to you, and there's one party that leads this agenda and one party that leads more of this agenda. When I was a member of the parliament, I was in the party that did a lot of work regarding social and economical issues. And we knew that a lot of the people that voted for us, often in the family, they'd say, okay, one would vote for a large party, one would vote for our party because we're more of, the social aspect and not necessarily like the security aspect or something like that. So, and that's something that Israelis are used to doing.
Does this lead to, I want you to help me make an argument for two things right now as you're speaking. I'm American, right? So like, I come from, this is the only world that I know in terms of politics from, voting and living. But in America, make an argument why the American system is better and make an argument why the Israeli system is better.
I think what's good about the American system is that you have some sense of stability. Okay. Once your government is sworn in, once it's, elected and it's there, it will be there for its term.
4 years.
No matter what, it's there. Okay.
Right.
And you can get upset, whatever, but you have time as, members of Congress. You have time to work. Right. In Israel, when I was elected into the parliament, I never knew how long my term was.
Wow.
So at the beginning, I was working like crazy. Every legislation I wanted to pass, I was working. I was afraid that we would fall apart. And I was just, I was running like marathon, but how do you say sprint?
Yeah.
A marathon of sprints. Like every time I was so afraid with that. And every time I was like, no, I have to pass it now. Like, and you don't have one moment that you could, and you can't even plan your term. You can't plan. And then all the time, everyone is busy doing politics. Because you don't even have 1 minute that you can let go, because the elections could be tomorrow. The elections could be next week. The elections could be next month. So you can't like breathe.
You know what? It kind of befits the Israeli culture to an extent also. There's,
we love it. We love it.
Go. Urgent. Go.
Yalla. It's very much. But so I think the American system gives that sense of stability. I think what's good about the Israeli system is that it gives you an opportunity to like different aspects of your identity. And I think that what we see like now in the United States, that you have to choose what side you're like and vote for one. And if you vote for Democrats, it's a set of several ideologies that some of them you agree with and some of them you don't. Like you can be very pro-Israel and you can be pro-choice. And there's nowhere you can be like both of them. You're laughing, but to us in Israel, it's very clear that you would never have that situation that, to be very right, even if you're very right wing, you will have an opportunity to also be a feminist. Like this is something that we don't get it. And because we have...
Explain that, Rachel, explain that. So you could be a right wing on security issues, but very left wing on economic issues and on social issues. Could you explain that?
So I was a member of that party like that. Okay.
What was it called?
It was called Kulanu. Right. Okay. I'm very feminist. And in social issues, I'm like, very whatever, center, left, whatever. And in security, I'm center right. And it was very clear to us. And we knew what we're voting and everything was okay. It worked. We knew what we're doing. And you don't need to, because it's not only two parties, you don't need to choose in like this weird, like it's almost enmeshed kind of, like, okay, so the pro-Palestinians are like very much part of the Democratic Party. So you're just stuck with them. And what do you do? And in Israel, people say that it might work better and it will give stability if we'll have a two-party system, but then usually would mean that the right wing would be very ultra-Orthodox. Because, the ultra-Orthodox usually go with the right wing. And then the whole party would be more ultra-Orthodox. And then you can't be very feminist. And then, you can't be very liberal in everything that has to do with state and religion. And we know that Israelis are much more like, I don't want to say sophisticated because Americans are very sophisticated, but I think we can bring our complex ideas into Israeli democracy and into our political system.
And let's go into one of the quirks of the Israeli political system. 2021, Naftali Bennett's party, Yamina, there are 120 seats. It won 7 seats, which is around 6% of the vote. Likud won 30. But Naftali Bennett became the kingmaker ultimately and became the prime minister under this rotation agreement between him and Yair Lapid. Could you share personal reflections about this one?
Hmm.
You just left politics a year or two before this. So
Yeah,
what was your personal reflection on that?
Well, first of all, it was after a few elections, time after time, not being able to form a coalition, and everything just got very, very messy. I think at that point, everyone, a lot of people, I don't want to say everyone, I think the Likud was upset, but I think a lot of people were just happy that there's some kind of coalition, something that will work, because if you go back to elections again and again, you don't have a budget properly, and all the budget is, we call it a 12th. Okay, you do you take the budget of the year before and you do one of 12, like for every month, and you can't push through in anything. Like everything is you just freeze. So I think in that sense, people were happy that at least something is happening, but that is like one of the extreme moments of Israeli politics. Usually it doesn't work that way. I think, I don't know what it would mean. Like, it's hard to tell. Time will tell how it will affect Israeli politics in the long run. It could affect Israeli politics, and we might see some form of legislation that trying to make sure that this can't happen again. Because basically what happens is it means that a party that could go either to one side or the other side, once it chooses one side, it has a lot of power, because if it doesn't join, because it's not 100% in that side, so it becomes the kingmaker, and then they can become the king.
Right.
The kingmaker became the king. Yeah,
it's wild. And I get it, but I get that it feels like, to me, and I'm being editorial right now, that feels more like a bug and not a feature in the design. Right? It's not.
So I'll say you have your challenges in your system. We have so many challenges in our system now. Like just the fact that almost all the politicians are the old politicians. I wanna say just like to give you a glimpse into how unbelievable it is. Because after October 7th, people in Israel, I don't know, very high percentage of Israeli society, they said, all the 120 members of Israeli parliament have to resign. We have to bring 120 new people into the system. The system is broken, whatever. And then the same leaders are there. So we will have new members of parliament, because the Likud will have less power and Eisenkot will have more power, whatever. But it is something about the inability to bring any change into the system. So that's like one problem that we have in our system. Another problem is what you're saying about how to form a coalition, and also inability to form a coalition. Okay, that's what we saw now, that we had again and again elections, and everyone knows that this might happen this time again. We might have several elections, and all the American Israelis that are coming flying into Israel, I don't know if they hear us now. If you saved money for the ticket, save money for a few more tickets, because if you have vacation days that you're using, save vacation days. You might have to go back and forth 3 times. We don't know. Maybe it will be over. Maybe these elections will, something will happen and whatever. And I'll also say that part of it is that the right wing, they don't need to win the elections to stay in power from election to election. You understand
Explain that.
Okay, so to form a government, you need to have 61 votes. Mm-hmm. Okay? The right wing, now if none of both sides, they don't get 61 votes, so the right wing that is in power now just stays in power in the meantime. Okay, and that's why you can have again and again elections. The center left have to have 61 votes to get the right wing out of power. So
when you say the right wing, I need to pause you on that. What does right wing mean in Israel? What is that? We use that all the time when we're talking about the history of Israel, the right wing versus the left wing.
Yeah.
But at one point in time in Israeli history, it meant socialist versus capitalist,
liberal,
right? And at one point in time, left wing versus right wing meant land for peace versus not land for peace.
Yeah.
What is it now? Now I understand left wing versus right wing to mean anti-Bibi, pro-Bibi. What does it mean? What does left versus right mean?
So it could be, that is one segment of the right wing, left wing. That's very interesting to hear you talking about it. But I think it's also the relationship with the ultra-Orthodox. Like, if you ask what is the issue that is tearing Israeli society, is what's happening with the ultra-Orthodox. I'm reminding you, we're after 3 years of very, very hard war. I mean, it's really, I can't say how. I'm sure if you listen to this podcast, so you know how.
No, but
how
why is it so hard?
challenging
Why is it so hard? 3 years later. 3 years
Also, we
later.
had thousands of people that were killed.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
If you're not ultra-Orthodox or Arab, you know, like, I can't tell you how many of my friends lost their kids. We're talking about families, reservists that are in duty for hundreds of years, hundreds of days. This year, 2026, they're going to have to do 90 days. 90 days in combat and not being at home. Like, that's mind-blowing.
Yep.
90, that's 3 months. 3 months of being out of work. Like, not being at work, not running your business. 3 months a year, not being with your kids, not being with your family. Like, and it's the third year. It's after 3 years already. Okay. This is a huge burden on Israeli society. And I think that there was this kind of thought or understanding, or we imagined that when things will get tough, the ultra-Orthodox will join the Israeli army. The ultra-Orthodox don't do army service in Israel. This is something that started when the state of Israel was born. There were 400 ultra-Orthodox that sat down and studied instead of joining the army. Ben Gurion gave that agreement. When Menachem Begin got into power in 1977, he said there's no more quota of 400. Whoever studies, while you study, you don't join the army. Once you want to go out to the working force, you join the army. What happened today is that we have hundreds of thousands of ultra-Orthodox men that don't study. They often they don't work, or they work like without, kind of black market. And they just don't join the army. And they're saying we'll never join the army. Like, I talked to ultra-Orthodox last week, a friend of mine, someone from my family. And I told him, listen, what will you tell the reservists? They're giving 90 days. It's already after 3 years. It is so hard. And he said, we're not joining the army. If they don't want to do their reserve duty, they won't do the reserve duty. It has nothing to do with us. I think this is something that is very hard for Israelis to hear. And the right wing is hugging the ultra-Orthodox because they're giving them the power. That's the government we've had now for the past 4 years during this very intensive war. So this is one issue. I think there is.
So on that issue, it's like, if I was just an alien coming in from outer space and I came down, I would not have put the ultra-Orthodox in the religious nationalist group. Like, if I just were to see that, I'd be like, wait, no, that doesn't make any sense. Like, from a coalition perspective, I'd be like, well, if the national religious group is out disproportionately serving in the Israeli army, and their whole ideology is about nationalism, religious nationalism. There's religious value to the creation of a nation state, building a nation state, which requires service, which requires activism, which requires going to the army, and not just being in the army, but being in infantry units, not just infantry units, but being in elite infantry units. I would say that those are two strange bedfellows, I would say. So I'm just putting a pin in that, because they don't seem like natural allies. And you're saying that the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim, as it's called in Hebrew in Israel, are actually essential in this election.
Yes. I think that a lot of the religious Zionists are having a hard time with this relationship with the ultra-Orthodox. But the issue of the ultra-Orthodox is a huge segment, but it's not the only one. I think that the question, the right wing, left wing kind of more security issue is still an issue. And the ultra-Orthodox say we will let the right wing do whatever they believe as far as security, and they give like a carte blanche. So that's one thing. And there is an issue, people don't know. I think it also goes back to history, like the near history, but what happened with Ariel Sharon, that when he was prime minister.
What happened?
That we left the Gaza Strip. Even though when he was elected like right wing. But then when he did that, I think this is something that since then, a lot of the religious Zionists many of them live in Judea and Samaria. This is a big issue. Like, this is a fear that one day they'll be evacuated from their homes. So joining forces with the ultra-Orthodox gives a lot, says at least they'll have their home. I think that the center should say everything that has to do with evacuating, so something that will be brought to, to a democratic poll, and any decision will be made in that way. And I think that would let go a lot of the fear. But that's my suggestion.
So you pointed to one issue, which is the one segment, I should say, of Israeli society, which is the Haredim, ultra-Orthodox. But you also mentioned Arab society, which is roughly 22% of the state of Israel. And I want to speak to this issue. One of the things that we hear across the world is that, Israel is a democracy. And one of the things that makes Israel a democracy is the very fact that Arab citizens of Israel serve in Israel's parliament. They serve in the Israeli Knesset. But there's a question underneath all of it that I don't think we speak about enough, or that I don't think we understand enough, is that Arab parties may be in the government, but they're rarely, if ever, in the ruling government. They're rarely, if ever, in the coalition that is part of decision making. So first of all, I want you to check me on that historically. Is that right, that Arab parties are not really ever in the ruling government? They're just sitting in parliament on the opposition? Or is there more to the story? What is the real story around Arab citizens in the Israeli Knesset?
Okay, so I want to go back to 1949. I love this story. Okay, all 1949. Right. It's during the Israeli War of Independence. The war isn't over yet. The government that was at the time come to Ben Gurion and say, we need to have elections. Okay, I think a lot of people were afraid that Israel will not be a democracy, that, because it's during war, the elections will be postponed. And Ben Gurion said, of course, we'll have elections. They stop everything and they hold elections. And this is during war. And why is it so important that to say that it was during the War of Independence? Because in the War of Independence, there were armies that fought against the state of Israel, but there were also citizens to be of Israel, Arab citizens that were fighting against Israel. And suddenly they said, okay, we're taking a pause in the war, go vote, and then we can continue. And the Arabs voted, which is, again, to me, it's mind-blowing, okay? Israel is one of the only countries in the world where no one ever had to demonstrate to get the right to vote, okay? Minorities, women's rights, everyone had the right to vote from day one. So once the elections are over, Ben Gurion gets very nervous. And he's like, oh my God, what do we do? We have members of the parliament that are, Arabs that are, some of them are against our country, okay? Like, they're fighting us, maybe their relatives are fighting us. And then he tries to bring these, to bring the Shabak, the Shin Bet, the
FBI.
Yeah, the Israeli FBI into the parliament to follow these members of parliament, the Arab members of parliament. He's worried about them. And Sprintzak, that he was their chairperson of the parliament, says, no, that's not going to happen. No, the army isn't going to come into the parliament. The Shabak isn't going to go into, the police isn't going to go into the parliament. And in Israel, there's a special law force, like with weapons and everything, like kind of a police that is special for our parliament. Okay. And that's why, and no one can come in with weapons. It is something that's very deeply democratic in our society. And one of the reasons is because of this weird first elections that we had, how do we make sure, how do we deal with the situation? And I want to say two things. One, first of all, it's true that Arab parties weren't part, or rarely are part of the government. Okay, they are, but they rarely are. There are often Arab members of non-Arab parties that are part of the government. Okay, that happens more often. Yeah, if it's an Arab party, that is something that I think Israeli society is still kind of negotiating. And I think a lot of the negotiation has to do with that first story I told you about the Arab parties when the state of Israel was born. I think there's like this internal discussion also amongst the Arabs and also amongst the Jews and also amongst the entire state of Israel. Like, are the Arabs, do they want to be part of the state of Israel as a Jewish democratic state? Like, do they see themselves citizens not only because they happen to be here, but they feel part of the story and they want to be part of the story? I think that that's what we see now with Mansour Abbas, that he says, yes, we're part of the story. We don't want to be opposition to the story. We're part of the Israeli story. And then they want to be part of the government and they want to serve in the government and they want to take responsibility to what's happening in Israel. Amongst the Arab parties in the past, we have, and also today, we have members of the Arab parties that say we feel much closer to the Palestinians, like we're part of the Israeli parliament, but we see ourselves as Palestinians. And then usually they're not part of the government. Like they don't want to be part of the government. And also, so if you're part of the government, you decide on security issues, you decide on the army. Like this is like a challenging, it is a challenge. And I think that this is something that's being negotiated like amongst everyone in Israeli society. And I think that we're on the verge of a change. Mansour Abbas is a very brave politician, very brave leader, not only politician, very brave leader. And I think he's leading like some of the Arab Israeli society to be much more part of Israeli society. But I can say that this is something that we see not only politically, but also like within Israeli society, like Arabs that feel part of the big story of the state of Israel.
So I want to make two arguments, one for, one against. So let me make an argument against including Arab parties in the government. The argument for that would be saying that a governing coalition has to share responsibility for the state's core interests, which includes security, like you're saying, as a Jewish state. And some Arab parties reject Zionism, which you haven't even explicitly said, but they reject Zionism, or they oppose defining Israel as a Jewish state. So that would make it very difficult to your story of 1949 to build trust on issues such as national security, military operations, or other broader questions. So that would be the argument against including Arab parties in the coalition of the government, not in the government itself, but in the coalition. The argument for including Arab parties in the government is that Israel is both Jewish and democratic, and roughly 20% or 22%, like you said, are Arab. And if Arab citizens are expected to participate in elections by paying taxes, contributing to society, then they should also have a pathway to participate in governing. And in 2021, Ra'am, which is led by Mansour Abbas, was part of the Bennett-Lapid coalition, and they participated in governing and focusing on domestic priorities. So those are the two different perspectives that I just wanted to lay out. And like you said, it's not that an Arab citizen of Israel cannot be part of the Israeli government. There are, and they often are, but they are not. The parties historically, outside of 2021, have never been part of the ruling coalition. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you see a future in which Ra'am and people like Mansour Abbas will say we are committed to the flourishing of a Jewish democratic state, and we are going to be part of the ruling coalition because they will be trusted? Now, the one question mark that I have on that, on top of the question, is, wait a second, you just made an argument, Rachel, that the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, are not part of the Israeli army, which creates a burden on Israeli society to be in reserves, to spend 90 days a year in it. Like, that's very hard. But what about Arab society? Mm-hmm. Why is Arab society, if not part of the Israeli army? What do you think about the intersection of all of that?
Yeah, so I want to say a few things. First of all, do I see our future, could the future be different? I think it could. I think it definitely could. I think that, as I said, I think that this is something that's being negotiated amongst the Israeli Arabs and amongst, entire Israeli society, Israeli Jews, right wing, left wing. I think this is something that we're kind of tapping into. And I can say that, like, also in the parliament, not only in the government, also in the parliament. So the defense committee. Okay, I was a member of the defense committee, and there the Arab representatives are not part of the defense committee. Like this is something that is like, I don't think it was ever it's not legal. It's not a legal issue, but they know they're not part of this committee because it's a committee that has that discusses everything that has to do with defense.
And is that just to, I want to cut to the kernel of I want to get to the issue. Is part of the challenge that Arab citizens of Israel are the same exact people as the Palestinians. They're the same cousins. They have the same family, same origin. Some of them either were expelled or fled in 1948, and some of them stayed. And the feeling is from these people that our cousins, our brothers, our sisters, our relatives are the enemies. Not the people necessarily, but the governing structures in these places, in the West Bank, in Judea, Samaria, in Gaza. The feeling is, wait, we don't have full trust because your cousins are the ones at war with us. Is that part of it?
Yeah, it's part of it. I'll also remind that we had a member of Israeli parliament, Azmi Bishara, that he fled Israel because it was suspected that he's a spy.
Wait, who is this? Tell me more about this person.
Azmi Bishara. He was a member of Israeli parliament, and he was like, everyone knew him. And then one day he disappeared, and there was this whole thing that they said that they realized that he was gathering information and giving it to other countries. Like he never went into trial because he fled the country. He doesn't live in Israel anymore, so we don't know exactly but we know he fled the country, Matt.
Right. So there's fear in that.
We don't know. Yeah. And so this is something it's always there in a sense. But I think that this is something that, we need to deal with. And I'll also say that I think there are different segments of Israeli Arabs. And that's also something we need to talk about. Like the Bedouins are different than the Muslims, that are different than the Christians. I will say that the Druze they serve in Israeli army, and they're very much part of the coalition and the government and everything. So it's not about being a Jew or non-Jew. It's about how much do you feel part of Israeli government, society, Jewish democratic country? Like that is the big question. So the Druze are in. The Christians also usually feel very close to Israeli society. What I'm doing now is horrible because I'm like,
you're painting with a wide brush.
Yeah, I know. So I just want to say, the Bedouins used to serve in the Israeli army for many years. Some do still. And Mansour Abbas, a lot of his voters come from the Bedouins. The Bedouin Arab society, and I think they feel closer in a way to Israeli society. So I think this is something that we're trying to kind of figure out. And we know that also when the state of Israel was born, there were different segments of what we call, Arab Israeli society. And there were part that felt more part of Israeli society and part that felt less. And I think that once you feel part of Israeli society, so you're not afraid to be part of the government because you won't be considered a traitor. Like I think that there are members of the Arab parties that don't want to be part, like the Palestinians will see them traitors. And so it's complicated.
So you've explained a lot about how we got to where we are now. I want to ask one more question just to have a little bit more clarity on the actual system. And then I want to go to a little bit about the future, but the system. So could you explain, you started talking about it before, but I want to understand it better. Why does a party with 3 or 5 people in the government...
Yeah. You can't have 3. You can't have 3.
Okay, what's the minimum? Okay, 4. Okay, 4. Sorry, that makes it even crazier that Naftali Bennett was prime minister with 7 seats. That's even crazier. But so let's say you have 4, 5, or 6 seats. Why? And besides being a kingmaker, why do they have such authority? Walk me through that a little bit more.
Why do the ministers have a big...
No, why does someone who only has 5 seats, why do they have a big portfolio potentially? Could you give me examples of that?
Yeah, so that's the art of negotiation. I'm smiling because it doesn't really make sense, but that's just the way it is. I'll also say that I think that our our system is broken in many ways. And one of the ways that the system is broken is that Netanyahu doesn't want to give a lot of power to the members of his party, because then they might get stronger and they might take over heading the party. So what they do is often Netanyahu gives members of his party like the portfolios that they're not interested in. So, so they won't excel in them.
Wait. This is in the weeds right now. I don't explain what you're saying. I'm not following.
Okay, so this is like
real politics. You're really teaching me politics. Okay.
Real politics.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you have a member of the Likud that really wants to be the minister of defense, okay, and is also very talented in it, so Netanyahu usually won't want to give it to him, because he doesn't want to make him very noticeable. Like if you think of Gallant, that he wanted the Ministry of Defense and he knew it and he wanted, think about his public profile. If you compare him to Israel Katz, that he doesn't come from the field and he doesn't have any public profile.
So you're saying Benjamin Netanyahu will elevate the profile of an Israel Katz who is less threatening to him than somebody like a Yoav Gallant.
Yeah. And not only elevate, he will give him a ministry that...
is that, are you stating an opinion or giving me a fact?
Look at that. I'm saying an opinion that is, I've been watching it for a long time and I just saw it time after time happening.
Fair enough.
And I also want to say that's one of the reasons that Netanyahu is very close to the ultra-Orthodox, because the ultra-Orthodox declare they don't want to be prime minister, okay, which is like another part of this, okay? He has 17 mandates that the people that don't want to be prime minister. Think of Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett worked for Netanyahu. Then he started a party, or he joined a party and then started by whatever. And Naftali Bennett was in many parties, but he wants to be the prime minister. And that's why he will always have, it's always threatening for Netanyahu. So one of the reasons Netanyahu keeps the ultra-Orthodox very close to him is because it gives him 17 or 15 mandates, like a lot of mandates, with no threat of wanting to be the prime minister. So, and this is something I heard from Netanyahu's people, okay? So it's not only an opinion. It's just the way politics work. And, everyone, when you're in politics, you also want to, you do your role, or you're supposed to do your role as prime minister, as minister, as MK, whatever, but you're also always watching who's your competition and how do you make sure you'll be reelected. So because also our system is not organized like your system, you 2 terms and you're out.
And that's it.
Here, everyone is always doing politics. You don't know when the elections will be. You can be reelected again and again. And a small party can suddenly become a prime minister, and a large party can say nothing makes sense. So
okay, I have 2 questions on this. We actually I'm impressed with us. We spent a lot of the time speaking about the history of the Israeli government and the way it works without talking about Bibi. But I want to ask a question on Bibi. Do you think, I'm bringing my American perspective into this, do you think it's possible that people like Zoran Mamdani and El Sayed in Michigan, do you think they're actually helping Bibi Netanyahu win?
Oh my God.
Ironically, they're meaning their opposition and demonization of him actually is going to be utilized by him and his and the Israelis in general to bolster them.
So I think that in the past, I would tell you that this is a lot of Netanyahu's politics, okay, to find the demon and say, I will protect you from the demon. I think it's getting, at this point, it's a little more challenging, because I think he always, because of his beautiful English and because of, his, he knows how to speak to Americans. I think that's something that is very high profile, in his, it's a big thing in who he is. So I think that now it could be a challenge for him. I think it would be, I don't think he would use Mamdani to prove that he is, he should be reelected. I do think that when Mamdani goes against Netanyahu, I don't think it's like, I think it elevates Mamdani. And I like, it doesn't weaken Netanyahu. I don't think it weakens Netanyahu, but I see what you're saying. I think there are like two parts to it. So if in the past it would just elevate him, now I think there are two parts to it.
The feminist part of me wants to just give a little editorial also that says, hey, this sounds a lot like fragile male egos, not knowing how to deal with issues. And if a few more women were in charge, is it possible that a lot of these issues would be cast to the side?
Well, listen, I was in a term, this is a sad moment, okay? I was in a term that we were over 30 women, members of Israeli parliament, 35, I don't remember the number, we were a lot. And there was a lot of women power, like girl power in the parliament. We stuck together. No, we did a lot of work. It was pretty amazing, what we got done, and we cooperated. And like the older, I was in UMK, I was for one term, and like the older women, they protected me when like someone said something that wasn't appropriate, like immediately all the, they were like, you won't talk to that way, like something that, it was very empowering and pretty amazing. We see the price of the fact that there are less women, and even when there are women, you don't have women heads of parties. When I was in the parliament, there were women that were heads of parties or former heads of parties, like very, very strong women. Today, the women are, they don't head the parties. It's a different kind of story. And that is there is a price that we're paying. There is a toll that we're paying as society with this. I think that, like this, I'll say, like from the Jewish perspective, right? In Bereshit, it says that God...
Genesis.
In Genesis, God created men and women. Like it's in, this is the way the world is supposed to be. We're supposed to work together. Unfortunately, when it doesn't work that way, there is a price that we pay. I hope there'll be more women in the future.
All right, so let me ask you. Maybe this is a concluding question. Based on everything we've spoken about, based on the various factors of the ultra-Orthodox in this, or the Haredim, the Arab citizens of Israel, the right, the left, I still don't have full clarity on what the divide right now is, outside of what it sounds to me as being protecting. It sounds to me like the vast majority of Israeli society is on the same page with regard to security, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I want to know what the real divide is. What is the real divide, and what you think is going to be what everyone should be paying attention to as this government forms?
Okay, so I think the real divide are the ultra-Orthodox. That's the biggest issue. That's the most painful issue. I say that there's another divide, or Could
you say more about that? Because if someone, I have a lot of listeners from across the political divide who might be very much so. Maybe they're Haredi, maybe they're ultra Orthodox. So what do you mean that they're the divide?
No, the divide is they need to join the army. We need them to join the army. That's it. Game over.
But they would say they don't need to. I'm saying the divide is you say they need to join the army. They say they don't need to join the army. They could study Torah, and that's of equal value. You're saying that's the divide, right?
Listen, I understand that you want to be like a moderator and kind of give a very but
I want to.
No. Yeah,
I want to present their perspective at the very least.
Their perspective is basically saying, it's not saying it's equal. They're saying we're not going to join the army. We don't care what you're saying. We're going to study Torah, and if you don't want to join the army, don't join the army. We're not coming. But that's what they're saying now, and they're saying it loud and clear. Like, I know it's very harsh to hear that, but they're saying it loud and clear. We're not joining the army. Period. We know that we can't continue. Like, this is not going to work. And before October 7th, in every given moment, there were 3,000 to 5,000 reservists on duty. Now we have between 50,000 to 80,000 reservists on duty in every given moment. Like, this is the game changer of October 7th is so huge. Like the reservists that we need in Lebanon and in Syria and Judea and Samaria and Gaza and everywhere. We need soldiers. We need manpower. So
that's the divide. That's the divide as you see it.
I think that's a major divide. Yeah. And also say, I run Ha'ogan for reservist families. Like, this is what we do. This is what I've been doing for the past 3 years.
Which is, by the way, a party in the Israeli government that might become...
There is a party. Yeah, the reservists. Yeah, that's... Yoaz Hendel started a party, but that's going back... Remember, going back to what I said, the threshold is so high that it's very difficult for new parties to be formed and to start, like, moving something because of like the
Rachel, is it possible that the reservist party might join the ultra-Orthodox parties in a ruling coalition?
I don't think so. No.
But it's possible, right?
Listen, everything is possible. It's
which as an American would be like, I don't understand what's happening.
Well, also Israelis won't understand what's happening. They would lose their credibility so quickly. No, really, I think, listen, I don't know. Maybe I don't, I think I understand Israeli society pretty well. I think they lose so much credibility very quickly. I don't think they would do that. It wouldn't be worth it It wouldn't be worth it for them to do it. I would be very surprised to hear them do that. Unless the ultra-Orthodox parties say, yes, we'll sit together, but we will join the army. If they say that, so hey, I'm happy for them to be part of the government. Of course, it's not personal. It's just, we need to make this happen. I think the right wing would say that a major issue is what happens with the Arabs. Like, does the center left coalition, does it lean on the Arab parties? Now, here's something interesting that's happening that we didn't talk about, is that Yoav Segalovich, that he was a very, very high ranked in the police, very high ranked in the police. He's probably joining Mansour Abbas's party, which is an Arab party, which is interesting because usually you have like Arabs joining Jewish parties.
And he's clearly a Zionist, you're saying? He's
full power Zionist. And he's probably, we don't know. I know it's being negotiated, but if he joins that party, so that's another step that Mansour Abbas is doing, walking towards like Israeli society and being part of like the Jewish democratic story.
Got it. Okay, so that's something to look forward to look to. Anything else that we should all be strategically be paying attention to 2 months from now? I mean, I won't ask for a prediction, but is it going to be Eisenkot? Is it going to be Bibi? Is it going to be who's like? What's the strategy we should be paying attention to? Because you started giving us the history of like the different coalition, the different parties coming together, vying for power, coming together. Like, what should we be looking to?
First of all, what I said, that the right wing don't need to win; they just need not to lose. Like that's a big issue when you're trying to understand what's going to happen. When you look at the polls, you need to count how many votes you have that can actually form a government. Okay, so what the right wing did for many years is like, are the Arabs part of the coalition? Aren't they part of the coalitions? You're going to have parties that are that could be part of the Eisenkot, whatever. He probably will be the leader, at least by the polls and also by Israeli history. I'll go back to that in a minute. You will have parties that will say, I want to join Eisenkot, but I have a hard time if he's leaning on the Arab parties, like if they're not willing to, So this will be an issue that we're going to see in the next few months. We could have several elections. I started by saying that, save money for tickets, save time. Maybe we won't, really, it's very hard to understand what will happen. And also I want to say that we might see a growth in the number of Arab Israelis that vote. And then all of the polls that we see are irrelevant. Because like, you know how there are always groups that it's hard to predict their behavior? Yeah. So the Arabs are a group that it's hard to predict their behavior. And if actually the percentage of their vote will be higher, that means that everyone else will have less mandates. And if you're trying to form a coalition that doesn't lean dramatically on the Arab party, so it would be even harder. You understand? So like there are a lot of... It's really hard to tell.
Can Mansour Abbas become a kingmaker and therefore the prime minister?
first of all, I'd say Mansour Abbas is wise enough not to become the prime minister with a small party.
But theoretically.
But he can't be. No, I'll tell you why he can't be. Because he can't be the one that says, I'll go either with them or with them. The only reason Bennett could do that is because that both sides were hoping that he will join them.
Got it.
Okay? The one that could do that, by the way, is Lieberman.
Yeah, just say a word about Lieberman.
Lieberman.
Let me tell you why it's confusing. First, in the early aughts, Avigdor Lieberman was viewed as an extreme right-wing politician.
Tell me about it.
And now he's being viewed as this divide, center left. Explain that to me. I know we have to go, but give me this last explanation. I need to understand this.
Yeah, Avigdor Lieberman, I can tell you that when I was in the coalition, in the government, and he joined our coalition, there were left-wing people that wrote to me, how can you sit with him? He's this radical right-wing, whatever. And I was like, it's okay. We can,
we got this.
It would be okay. It would be okay. Yeah, whatever. And today they love him, which is interesting how politics, play out. But Lieberman, he made Aliyah from the USSR, so he's like Russian considered, and he had a party that was a very kind of Russian party. I want to remind you, a million Jews made Aliyah from the USSR, immigrated from the USSR. So that was the beginning. That was his party. Today he's like this very liberal, like, LGBTQ, fighting against the ultra-Orthodox, whatever, like against religion and, very harsh religion and the state and whatever. Right. And at the same time, he's right-wing. He's very seriously right-wing. So that's Lieberman.
Seriously right-wing on national security.
National security, yes. Okay. Seriously right-wing on national security, yes. So he's like this very liberal and very like security right-wing, and that's a blend we have in Israel.
Right. Okay. Right. Which in the US is just, it's not the same. It's different. It's just different.
It's different. He could be the kingmaker. That might happen. You don't know.
Rachel, I want to thank you so much for explaining for me, like, you really helped me walk through both how the Israeli political system works and also what we should be paying attention to today. So a huge thank you to you, Rachel, for joining us. Unpacking Israeli History is a production of Unpacked, an OpenDor Media brand. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify. It really helps other people find our show. And one more time, I love hearing from you. So email me at noam@unpacked.media. This episode was produced by Rifki Stern. Our team for this episode includes Jenny Falcon, Andrew Miller, Rob Pera, and Ari Schlacht. I'm your host, Noam Weissman. Thanks for being here. See you next week.